Hi, I'm Rose, and today I'm with Radhanath Swami, teacher of the devotional path of Bhakti Yoga. Welcome.
Thank you, Rose.
It's an honor and a privilege to have you here today.
It is my honor and privilege to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Tell me, we are all seekers, and you are a seeker. You left Chicago when, in like 1950, I think it was.
I was born in 1950.
You were born in 1950, in Chicago, and you left to find your path. How did you muster the courage? What was calling you to pull you away from your home?
I was a teenager in the 1960s, which was a turbulent time in our history, and I saw so many apparent inconsistencies in the society around me. I saw a nation that's built on freedom and liberty for all, but if a person had African American complexion, they really did not have liberties. I saw freedom for religion, but there was much prejudice and hatred in the name of a loving God. So I had many questions. And I joined the civil rights movement, and I became a member of the counterculture, trying to explore on a social level, answers to these questions that were really deeply affecting my heart. And eventually I came to a conclusion that unless I really changed myself, I could not truly be a sustainable change to the world. And I believed that that change required a spiritual transformation. But then there was a challenge.
And you were 19 years old?
I was a teenager, and it culminated when I was 19 years old, when I went on a summer trip to Europe with a friend, just to explore how other people of other lands see America, and see God, and see each other. And eventually, I became so obsessed with a spiritual goal in my life. I was studying Judaism and Christianity, and I was studying yoga, and eventually I was living in a cave in Greece, in an island, and I had a calling to go to India. So I hitchhiked. I essentially hitchhiked from London to Greece, and then Greece through Turkey, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and then I went to the Himalayas, and I lived as a wandering seeker. It's called a sadhu.
A sadhu?
Sadhu.
Ah, sadhu.
And I was searching, and I was studying. In the Middle East, I studied Islam, and in India, I studied different varieties of Buddhism and Hinduism and yoga. And finally came to this path of bhakti, which is a path of devotion, where we believe that love for God is within the heart of every living being. And when that love is awakened, it naturally expresses itself as compassion. And when you water the root of a tree, naturally that water extends to every leaf and branch and flower of the tree. And similarly, when we awaken this love of God that's within our heart, it naturally expresses as love for all living beings.
In your latest book, The Journey Within, you talk about God, and you talk about how people, what our views and ideals of God are. And you actually describe what the meaning of God really, is for you. Can you explain that to our audience, how you say so eloquently that it makes you think about God in a different way?
To awaken this love for God is the essence of all great religions. It's beyond sectarianism. It's beyond the religious conceptions that divide us.
Right.
Janmadyasya yataha. In the Vedas it is said that God is the source of everything that exists and the source of everyone that exists. And that Supreme God is within the heart of every living being. And this question of who am I? We have a body, but I'm in my body. I'm not my body. And I'm in my mind thinking through, but I'm not my mind. The living force that's seeing through the eyes and hearing through the ears and tasting through the tongue and thinking through the brain and feeling through the heart, that living force is a divine part of God. And that one God has many names according to different traditions. Just like the sun planet when it rises. In India, they call Surya. In Mexico, Sol. And in New York, they call the sun. But it's the same sun. The source of all light, the source of life. So there's one God for all living beings. And the Atma, or the living force within us, is a part of that God. We're eternal. We're beyond life as we know it. We're beyond death. And the nature of that Atma, or the soul, is to love God. And it's that pleasure of love that everyone is seeking. Things could give some pleasure to the body and mind, but things can never give pleasure to the heart. Only to love and be loved can give pleasure to the heart. Unfortunately, in the world, so often people love things and use people to get them and keep them. But a cultured society, spiritually, is one that where we love people. And we use things to express that love. And the origin of that love, according to the Vedas, the scriptures, and I believe the essence of all the great scriptures of all the great religions of the world, the origin of that love is the love between the soul and the Supreme Soul. To feel God's limitless love. And to be an instrument of that love in whatever we do, whatever we say, wherever we are. And it may seem like a far ideology, but actually it's the simplest, most basic truth of life. And it's inherent within each and every one of us. It's not that love for God and compassion for all living beings is something that needs to be superimposed on us. It simply needs to be awakened. And by, people who inspire us and some spiritual practices and living with character, integrity, then naturally that love is awakened within us. And then the Gita tells, Bhagavad-gita, that true wisdom and true education is the ability to see every living being with equal vision. Whether one is male or female or black or white or red or brown or yellow or Hindu or Muslim or Jain or Jew or Christian or Sikh or agnostic or atheist, even whether one is a human or a dog or a cat or a cow or an elephant, wherever there's life, when we understand, when we experience the sacredness of who we truly are, then we can recognize and appreciate the sacredness in all life and respect that. And on every level of society, that's so much needed.
Oh, absolutely. Now, in your book, you write that there's a spiritual energy everywhere. And even though it's invisible to the material eye, we can feel it. Can you expand on that and help our audience understand what that means?
When I was a little boy, we had television with those antennas that you moved around to get a good reception. And in Chicago, I believe we had 5 channels. And today with satellite TV, there's so many channels.
Yeah. Too many.
And we used to have to get up and turn a dial to change the channels. Now we just sit and press a button.
I remember that.
And it goes and you press one button and you get a football game in Texas, and another button you press, same button actually, and you get news from Baghdad, and another button you press and there's a soap opera from New York City. So how is that? You just press a button and you hear something and you see something that's completely different. And it's not that you have to order it, I want this particular frequency to come to my television. that means the frequencies are already there. According to what frequency we access, or let us say whatever frequency we tune into, that's what we access. So there's so many frequencies all around us, and they're invisible. And according to what we tune into, we're going to be so much affected by that. There's the frequency of greed, and there's the frequency of envy, and there's the frequency of arrogance, frequency of depression. There's so many frequencies everywhere, and each and every one of us are like an antenna too. According to what we tune into, we also emit that frequency. So grace, God's grace is everywhere. It's within everything, within everyone, and outside. And spiritual life, true religion, true yoga, whatever we want to call it, is essentially to tune into that frequency of grace, to tune into the frequency of the all-pervading, limitless love for God, which is very personal. And when we tune in, we find it within ourselves. We find that love within ourselves, and we can actually recognize it potentially everywhere.
So how can we, when we're picking up these frequencies of this energy that is just overwhelming and is negative, how do we stop it? How do we stop ourselves from absorbing it?
Turn the channel.
So how can we change the channel? Easier said than done.
It's not so difficult. If we regularly tune into these positive frequencies, to that inherent goodness within ourselves, then we'll be able to actually have the strength to deal with all these other frequencies.
Okay.
It's just like if a building has a very strong foundation, then even when storms come, the storm is there, but the building remains stable. So when internally, within our mind, within our character, if we have a strong foundation, and that foundation is inner fulfillment, inner satisfaction, inner meaning in life, that gives us a strong foundation. Then the temptations and the fears that inevitably come as storms of life, we can maintain our integrity, our dignity, and our purpose through them all.
It's known that you devote your life to service, and there are charities and organizations that you're involved with, establishing hospitals, eco-friendly farms, and midday meals. What is midday meals about?
So in Mumbai, where I've lived for about the last 30 years, the community that I'm a part of, we've developed various projects, and one of them is this midday meals. Because in India, illiteracy is a big problem. And the number one reason for illiteracy is hunger. That a child would rather beg or work child labor than sit in school and not be able to concentrate because they're hungry. And usually the parents would rather have them out earning something. But if we can give them a nutritious meal, then they're actually really happy to stay in school and learn. So we started in a small way giving out meals in schools. And we have a hospital, a 200-bed hospital, Bhakti-Vedanta Hospital, named after our guru, Srila Prabhupada. And the nutritionist gives us the ingredients to make really nice meals. And just our little ashram, we're feeding about 310,000 children every day.
Oh, that's great.
And throughout India, our society is over 1.2 million children every day. And I think it's about 30% less people drop out in those schools because they get these meals.
Now, tell us a little bit about the Hare Krishnas. You've been leading them for the past 20 years. You're celebrating 50 years. Is it this year?
And first arrived in New York City. In 1965, actually, he left this holy place in India and took a boat, a cargo ship. And it was a 38-day voyage. And he was 70 years old when he boarded the ship. And when he came to New York City, he didn't know anyone and he didn't have any money. He was just going from place to place. But he wanted to give this beautiful, essential message of how to love God and how to love each other and how to actually see the whole environment as the sacred property of God. And because he saw so much conflict in the world and he saw so much depression and suffering in the world, he wanted to try to make a difference by helping people to understand their true potential and what could be awakened. And he brought this message of Krishna consciousness. There is one God for all living beings who has many names. The name Krishna is a primary name of God in India and in the Vedas, the scriptures of India, which means the all-attractive one, the all-beautiful one, where the power and majesty of the one supreme being is overwhelmed by the sweetness and the grace and the beauty of God. And that's the devotion to Krishna focuses on that beauty and that sweetness and that unifying nature of God's love.
But now people used to, view the Hare Krishna as a cult, and you seem to have made it more mainstream. What changes have you made?
Well, I first encountered the Krishna consciousness spiritual path in Vrindavan before I met any of the people of the Western Hare Krishna movement. And I saw that this is a spiritual tradition and a philosophy that has its roots in thousands and thousands of years of tradition. And there's a whole lineage of saintly people that goes way, way, way back in time. And that's where I really became connected. And after being in Vrindavan for about 6 months, Prabhupada came with some of his Western followers, just a few of them. And what impressed me is that they were presenting something that was very, very authentic, very deep and very real and very much an integral part of the history of the East, and with such a universal message and a universal application. So when this society came to the West, it seemed like something kind of new, and therefore it was sometimes called a cult. And of course, in the early days, I think some of the devotees did some pretty crazy things too.
I'm sure.
Many of them were coming out of the counterculture. But the roots and the tradition is something very deep and very profound, and there's always been hundreds of millions of people in India following this path.
To find out more about the wonderful work that Radhanath Swami does, please visit his website at radhanathswami.com. You can also visit the bhakticenter.org and the International Society for Krishna Consciousness.